There is a moment that many of you may recognize. You are sitting at the dinner table, perhaps with your children, your grandchildren, or old friends. Someone says something you know is not quite right. Or perhaps a decision is being made that you have seen fail before. And something rises in you, a familiar urgency. I need to say something. I need to be heard. And so you speak. And the room shifts. Not dramatically, no one raises their voice, but something goes slightly cold. Eyes move away from yours. The conversation changes direction. And later, driving home or lying in the quiet of your bedroom, you feel it, that particular loneliness of having spoken and not truly been received. Many of us, as we grow older, believe that age earns us the right to speak more freely. And in some ways, it does. Experience is a form of knowing that cannot be faked. But there is a teaching, ancient, quiet, and deeply practical, that says something different. It says, in old age, the most powerful thing you can do is learn when not to speak. Not because your words have no value, but because some words, spoken at the wrong moment, in the wrong way, quietly close doors that take years to reopen. In the Pali language, the ancient language of the earliest Buddhist teachings, there is a word, mauna. Mauna. It means sacred silence. Not the silence of defeat, not the silence of someone who has given up or been pushed aside, but the silence of someone who has chosen, with full awareness, not to speak. The Buddha himself practiced mauna at specific moments, not because he had nothing to say, but because he understood something that most of us take a lifetime to learn, that silence, in certain situations, is not the absence of wisdom. It is the wisdom. In today's talk, I want to share with you 4 specific situations, 4 moments that arise again and again in the lives of those walking their later years, where choosing silence will protect your dignity, preserve your relationships, and deepen the peace within you. These are not easy teachings, because in each of these situations, you will likely feel that you should speak, that it is the right thing to do, that staying silent is somehow a failure. I ask only that you sit with what I offer and notice whether any of it rings true in your own life. Let us begin. The first situation is this: when you are angry or when you are hurting. In Pali, there is a word for the kind of inner wound that speaks before wisdom can intervene. Agata. A-ga-ta. It refers to a deep, simmering resentment, the kind that has been quietly building, perhaps for weeks or months or even years, and then suddenly finds a doorway and rushes out. We have all felt it, a comment from a child that dismisses us, a decision made about our lives without our being consulted, a gathering we were not invited to, a phone call that was too short or never came at all. These things hurt, and they should hurt. The pain is not wrong. The pain is telling you that something matters to you, that connection matters, that being seen matters, that respect matters. But there is a difference between the pain being real and the words spoken from that pain being wise. Let me tell you about a man named Harold. Harold was 71 years old. He had lived a full life. He had worked hard, raised his children, been present for his family in all the ways he knew how to be. And when his son and daughter-in-law made a significant decision about where to spend the holidays, a decision that left Harold out, he was hurt. Not just a little, deeply. And Harold said something, not cruelly, not with shouting, but with the particular precision of a man who has been careful with language his whole life. Harold told his son exactly what he thought. He was honest, he was clear, he was, in many ways, right. And a door closed between them that took almost 2 years to reopen. Not because Harold was wrong about what he felt, but because the words were spoken while the wound was still raw, and words spoken from raw wounds carry a kind of heat that the other person feels long after the conversation ends. The teaching here is not suppression. I am not asking you to pretend the hurt is not there or to perform a peace you do not feel. The teaching is about timing. In the Theravada tradition, we speak of kalavadin, speaking at the right time. And the right time is rarely when the pain is at its freshest. What I encourage is this: when you feel that heat rising, that urgency to say it now, practice what I call the 24-hour pause. Give the words one full day before they leave your mouth, not to abandon them, not to pretend they don't need to be said, but to let the heat cool until only the truth remains. Because truth spoken without heat has a very different quality than truth spoken in fire. One opens doors, the other, too often, closes them. The second situation, when people around you are in conflict and that conflict does not directly involve you. In Pali, the quality that guides us here is upekkha, u-pek-kha, equanimity, the capacity to witness without being consumed, to be present in a storm without becoming the storm. Upekkha is one of the 4 Brahma-viharas, the divine abiding places of a practiced heart, and it is perhaps the most misunderstood. People often think equanimity means not caring, that it means turning away, becoming cold, becoming uninvolved. But true upekkha is not distance. It is the capacity to care deeply while resisting the pull to control what you care about. And nowhere is this more tested than when the people we love are in conflict with one another. I want to tell you about a woman named Dorothy. Dorothy was 68 years old, sharp, warm, experienced, the kind of grandmother who always knew what to say, or so she believed. One afternoon, she was visiting when her 2 adult children, a son and a daughter, fell into a sharp disagreement about money, an inheritance, old resentments, the kind of argument that had been simmering for years before Dorothy arrived and simply needed one afternoon to boil over. Dorothy saw immediately what was happening. She had watched this dynamic for decades. She knew, or felt she knew, who was carrying more of the burden and who was carrying more of the blame. And so, with the best of intentions, she stepped in. She meant to bring calm. She meant to bring perspective. She had earned the right to speak into this, hadn't she? Within 10 minutes, both of her children were no longer arguing with each other. They were both, quietly, frustrated with Dorothy. This is one of the most painful patterns that arises in families across the later years of life. The elder steps into the conflict, and the conflict simply reorganizes itself around the elder. Now everyone has a new target, and the original wound, the one that needed tending, remains untouched. Here is what Dorothy could not see in that moment. Her presence alone was already a teaching. The fact that she was there, calm, not panicking, not escalating, that was already a form of wisdom. She did not need to speak for her presence to have weight. In old age, we sometimes forget this. We have spent so much of our lives doing, solving, fixing, mediating, building, that we do not know how to simply be in a room without taking action. But being the still point in a turning room is itself an act of profound love. It is upekkha made visible.
If you are called to speak, if someone directly asks for your perspective, then offer it, briefly, once. But if the argument is not yours, if no one has turned to you and said, "Please, what do you think?" practice the silence of presence. Stay in the room. Stay warm. Stay calm. Let your steadiness be the teaching. You may be surprised how much more they remember you for what you did not say. The third situation is perhaps the most delicate. And I say that because it is the one most rooted not in anger, not in conflict, but in love. It is this: when you have already said something, already given the advice, the warning, the concern, and you feel the urge to say it again. In Pali, there is a concept called papancha. Pa-pancha. It refers to mental proliferation, the tendency of the mind to elaborate, to circle, to repeat, to expand outward into more and more words when stillness would serve better. Papancha is not a flaw of intelligence. It is often a flaw of love that has not yet learned to let go. I want to speak carefully here, because I know this touches something tender in many of you. When we are older, when we have lived long enough to see certain patterns clearly, when we have watched people we love make choices that cause them pain, there is an almost unbearable weight to that knowledge. You can see what is coming. You have perhaps lived through something very similar yourself, and you have said something, you have offered what you know. And then they did not change course, or they did not seem to hear you, or they heard you and dismissed it. And the weeks pass, and you watch, and the fear grows, and eventually you say it again. And then perhaps a third time. Let me tell you about Frances. Frances was 73 years old, and she loved her daughter with the full force of a long life. Her daughter was in a marriage that worried Frances. Not abusive, nothing like that. But there were things Frances saw, patterns of imbalance, moments of unkindness. And Frances, because she loved her daughter, said something. She said it clearly and from the heart. Her daughter thanked her and changed the subject. 2 months later, Frances said it again. Different words, same concern. Her daughter became quieter at the end of that phone call. 4 months after that, Frances said it a third time. Her daughter stopped calling as often. Frances had not become less loving. She had not become less right. But her daughter had begun to experience her mother's repeated concern not as love, but as a verdict. As a message that said, "I do not trust you to figure this out. I do not believe in your capacity. I have already decided how this ends." And so the daughter slowly stopped bringing her life to her mother. I want to sit with this for a moment, because I know that for some of you, this is not a story about someone else. This is your story. And I want you to know that what drives the repetition is not wrong. It is fear. It is the love of someone who cannot bear to watch a person they cherish walk toward pain. But here is what the Dhamma asks us to consider. You have already done your part. You said it. You said it honestly and with love. That seed has been planted. Whether it takes root, when it takes root, how it grows, that is no longer yours to control. There is a teaching in anicca, impermanence, that we usually apply to loss, to aging, to the passage of time. But anicca also applies to outcomes. You cannot hold the future in place by speaking of it again and again. Life will unfold as it will unfold. The people we love will make their choices. And our role, the role of the elder who has offered wisdom and released it, is not to haunt them with our warnings. It is to remain present, loving, and available when they are ready to return. Say it once, say it clearly, say it with love, and then let it go. The releasing is not abandonment. It is the deepest form of respect you can offer another person. The respect of trusting that they are capable of navigating their own life. The fourth situation, when you feel the urge to compare how things are now to how they used to be. In Pali, atita, atita, clinging to the past. The suffering that arises when we live more fully in what was than in what is. We all carry the past. We are built from it. And there is nothing wrong with memory, with history, with the wisdom that comes from having lived through things. These are gifts. But there is a particular way of speaking about the past that quietly removes us from the present lives of the people we love. And it sounds like this. When I was your age, we didn't have all of this. Things were simpler before. People had more respect. We didn't need all these devices to feel connected. I graduated without any of this help, and we turned out fine. Every one of these statements may be true, and yet every one of them carries a subtle message that the listener feels before they fully understand it. I am not really here with you. I am somewhere else, somewhere that no longer exists, and I find it more real than where you are standing. Let me tell you about a man named Robert. Robert was 76. He was proud, and rightly so, of the hard road he had walked. He had built a career without connections, raised children through lean years, and arrived at his late 70s with a quiet dignity. At his granddaughter's college graduation, the whole family gathered. His granddaughter had worked for this moment, genuinely worked, through difficulty and uncertainty and long nights. It was, by any measure, a triumph. And Robert, moved by the occasion, reached back into what he knew. He talked about his own graduation, about how different it was, about how they wore rented suits and didn't have the ceremonies they have now, about how his generation learned self-reliance in ways this generation would perhaps never understand. His granddaughter smiled. She said the right things. She hugged him at the end. That summer, she called him twice. Robert did not understand what had happened. He had not been unkind. He had simply shared what he knew. But what his granddaughter had heard, without being able to fully name it, was that her moment had been measured against his and found lesser. The comparison, however unintentional, had made her achievement about him. Here is the practice I offer in place of comparison: curiosity. Instead of reaching backward into what you know, reach forward into what they know. Ask your granddaughter, what does today mean to you? What was the hardest part of getting here? What comes next? And how do you feel about it? These questions keep you in the room. They signal, I am here with you in this moment. Your life is interesting to me. You are not a reflection of my past. You are something new, and I want to understand it. This is not a small thing. In a world where older adults sometimes feel they are no longer seen, the act of genuinely asking, of choosing curiosity over commentary, is also how you make sure that others continue to bring their lives to you. Stay in the present. Let the past be what it is, something that shaped you, not something that must shape every conversation. The people around you will feel the difference, and they will draw closer. I want to close with an image. Imagine an elder, perhaps someone you have known or someone you hope one day to be, sitting at the edge of a family gathering, not absent, not pushed aside, simply still, watching, taking in the movement around them with eyes that have seen many seasons. They do not correct the young ones when a small mistake is made. They do not enter the side argument happening near the kitchen. They have told their daughter what they needed to say once, and they wait now in the quiet trust that it was heard. They do not compare this gathering to gatherings from 30 years ago. They are simply here. And something in the room responds to that stillness. Without anyone saying it, without anything being announced, people find their way toward that person. They sit closer. They speak more honestly. They lean in. This is the power of mauna, sacred silence, practiced not as withdrawal but as fullness, not as the silence of someone who has nothing to offer, but as the silence of someone who has offered everything worth offering and now simply rests in it. The Buddha taught that the awakened mind is like a still lake. Not dead water, not water without depth, but water so still that it reflects everything clearly. The trees, the sky, the passing clouds, without distortion, without clinging, without needing to be anything other than what it is. In old age, this is the invitation, to become the still lake. To speak, yes, when the moment calls for it. To offer wisdom, yes, when it is asked for. To be present, fully, in all the seasons of the people you love. But to understand, deeply, peacefully, that silence is not the absence of love. It is love that has matured. Love that has learned to trust. Love that has let go of the need to be heard in order to be felt. The quieter you become, the more your presence speaks. May you find this peace in your remaining years. May those you love feel your stillness as warmth. May you release what no longer serves and rest in what has always been true. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.